Hey everybody, my name is Patrick O'Halloran. I am a solutions architect with Wearscape, and today I'm going to be giving you a demo on 3D, our design tool, and Red, our builder tool, that give you just fantastic productivity gains in designing, developing, deploying your fully documented data warehouse. So to begin with, in 3D, we have connections. Connections are to data sources. They could be ODBC, JDBC connections. They could be flat files, JSON files, XML files, CSVs, fixed width, whatever it is. They could be REST APIs. Pretty much anywhere where you have data, we can connect to it, pull it in, manage it, and get it loaded into your data warehouse. So I've got the Northwind database selected here. This is a sample database from Microsoft. And down here, you can see in the workflow buttons, generally it's telling me what my next suggested step is. And I'm going to discover the connection. So I'm going to profile it and learn a little bit more about it. I need to give it a name, my discovery. I need to give it a version number. I'll call this version 2. I'm going to filter out, I've got a few options here. I'm going to filter out the views and system tables because I don't care about those. Then I'm also going to exclude any tables that start with sys. I'm going to click OK. I'll do a full profile. And then full scan, and then profiling. I'll also do a full profile, and then I'll explain what these two things are. This will take just a few seconds. So here is my discovery of my source system. We've looked at the catalog tables within, in this case, SQL Server, and pulled out all the tables, all the relationships, primary keys, foreign keys, and everything else. Now, let's mention the profiling of data. We've run some SQL statements behind the scenes. And if I look at the profiling results on each of these tables, I've got results on many different metrics. This is the full count of what we're looking at. So I can look here and see that, for example, the region column in the customers table has 65%, almost 66, about 2/3 null. These are very extensible, very flexible. You'll find that's true of everything in 3D. If I have other metrics I want to add to my profiling, maybe there's special codes I'm looking for. Maybe I want to know how many records exist after a certain date. Whatever it is, I can add my own metrics and perform those as well. So the profiling does two things. It allows me to, personally to look at the data, get an understanding of what's what. Maybe I can help to identify primary keys, foreign keys, relationships, things like that. But also, I talked about how we've gone to SQL Server and pulled in the primary keys, foreign keys, and things like that. But what if you're pulling data from a system that doesn't have those things? What if it's a REST API or a file or a database that doesn't have these relationships? And it's important that we define these relationships in our discovery of our source system, because this is going to drive a lot of what happens later. 3D is almost entirely rules-based, and the more information it has, the better the rules will work, and the more automation will benefit you in what it's producing. So let's say these don't exist. Let's say these relationships don't exist. What can I do? Well, I can manually tie together pretty much any two as primary key, foreign key. I can do those relationships. But also what I can do is I can derive relationships. In this case, what 3D is going to do, it's going to look at table names, it's going to look at column names, it's going to look at data types, it's going to look at profiling criteria. For example, I may say that if a particular column has more than 10% null, we don't want to consider it as a primary key. If it's not unique, we definitely don't want to consider it a primary key. But I've got the ability to use automation to make suggestions on what primary keys we should create. In this case, it's suggesting 3 primary keys for the customers, shippers, and suppliers table using company name as the primary key. Now, I'm not going to accept any of these, but I certainly could go through and look at all these relationships, foreign key, primary key relationships, and accept any of them as I can. As I said, it's important that you define your source system well, because this is going to drive a lot of the follow-on work. And what we'll do next is we will assign attributes to all of these column types, and that will also further help with the automation. So now that I've got my source system defined, all the relationships defined, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start creating my data vault design. This would be a conceptual model of what my data vault looks like. Now, normally what you would do in a full-blown environment is you would have an analysis of the business terms. So what is an order, what's a customer, what's an employee. There, you may talk to several groups. You may talk to a QA group, a shipping group, whatever it is. In this case, we're going to keep things very simple. I'm just going to create a new Data Vault design. I'm going to call it Demo 2. We're going to create that. Right now, I will just skip all this, and I've got a blank design here that has nothing in it. So what I'm going to do is go back to my source system. I'm going to select a few tables. Let's select, say, employees. We'll throw that in there. We'll throw in customers. We'll throw in orders, order details, and products. I think that's good. We'll just do that. So these are going to be the entities in my raw vault, Now what I can do now is I need to assign attributes to these, or what kinds of data are contained in these tables. And I can do that simply by clicking Assign Attribute Types. Again, it's rules-based. There's a lot of rules deciding what becomes a business key, what becomes a linked business key, what becomes a satellite, what becomes medium volatility. I can also add my own statuses. It goes through it, runs all these steps. Again, everything is rules-based. And now I can review the types if I need to change them, but I will just assume they're all okay for now and assign them. And now you can see it's gone through, and for every single column, in every single table, it's gone ahead and assigned one or more attributes. For example, the employee ID as a linked business key and a business key. I can certainly change these. Let's say I'm looking at customers and I decide that some of these need to change. I can define, say, all these geographic ones. I can change them from medium volatility to low volatility. I've got all these different attributes I can assign. I've even created my own, all of these except for the last one are out of the box. I created one on my own called PII. I can flag things as critical, as temporary, whatever is appropriate. And the rules engine, as it goes through, uses these attributes. Here's my customer now, and you can see that the static color of these have gotten lighter because it went from medium rate of change to low rate of change. But I can certainly, as I said, define my own attributes. And again, it's important that this step be done correctly and carefully because this is what's going to drive the actual creation of the conceptual model of the raw business vault, the hubs, the satellites, and the links, which we'll see next. All right, so I profiled my source system. I've created on a blank sheet of paper the various entities I want to include in my data vault. I've assigned attributes to them, either automatically or manually. And now the fun begins. Based on the data types, based on the attributes, based on the relationships, when I click on Generate Data Vault, I've got some rules here that are going to run, and I need to give it a name. I'll call this Demo 2 as well. I've got some naming conventions. What do I want to call my hash keys? The default is HKeyH and HKeyL for hash key hub and hash key link. As with everything else, it's configurable. I can change those to whatever I want them to change. What do I want to call the tables that are going to get created? Again, that's all configurable. And then what rules do I want to follow? So these are the out-of-the-box rules on creating raw vault, hub satellites, and links from my design. And I can certainly add rules if there's things I want to do, if there's naming conventions I want to follow, if I want to change data types, if I want to rename columns, if I want to handle any kind of special circumstances. I talked before about adding my own attributes. If I want to have special rules in place for those new attributes, maybe I want to break them into a different table. Maybe I want to rename them a certain way. Whatever it is, I've got incredible flexibility here in the rules. So I'll just use the out-of-the-box rules. And what it's going to go through is all these rules based on the attributes, based on the data. It's going to create my raw vault. And here we go. We've got satellites for medium rate of change. We've got links. We've got more satellites. We've got hubs. And I believe, yeah, here's my two columns, two tables. I did change the attributes on some of the columns in the customer table, the geographic ones, to low rate of change, and you can see that they've been broken out into a separate satellite. Maybe one of these will become a type 1 dimension and another type 2 dimension. Now what I need to do is review this, make sure this is exactly what I want. This is my logical model of my data warehouse, my data vault design with the hub satellites and links. Are they correct? Do they make sense? I can review this, I can test it. If I don't like what I see, I can go back a step. Maybe I need to change the rules. Maybe I need to change what entities are in there. Maybe I need to change the attributes that are assigned to some of the columns. But the nice thing is I can, as you saw how long it took just a few seconds to create this, I got the ability to just rapidly create this, make any small changes, and then regenerate it. And I can certainly regenerate with different version numbers. I've also got the ability pretty much anywhere in here to compare one version against another, to merge changes. So maybe my data vault design is a small piece of a larger project. I can use 3D to merge my changes in with other projects as well. Similarly, let's back up a little bit. I can compare my source discovery. Remember when we did that and we looked and found the relationships of all the tables? I can rerun that against the source system and compare the new version against the previous version. Maybe I've got a golden image that I kept. And I can get some warnings. Maybe indexes have changed, maybe columns have changed, been added, been deleted. I won't know if the data itself has changed, but I'll certainly know if the physical structure of the source system has changed. So that's it now. I've got my raw vault, hub satellites and links. I've looked it over. I decided, yeah, this is correct. This is what I want. And my next step will be to create what we call load and stage tables so we can get data from the source system, do our transforms, and then populate this new raw vault. All right, the next step in building our data warehouse is creating load and stage tables. Again, load tables are where we're going to bring data out of our source system, ODBC, JDBC connections, flat files, REST APIs, whatever it is, and load it into our target. That's an interesting point I haven't brought up yet. If you notice, so far I haven't told it what the target is. So far we're working at a conceptual and logical level, and it doesn't really matter what the target is at this point. If you see here, we've got some pseudo variable types: target date time, target integer, target date time, target varchar. That's because 3D doesn't know where this is going. Is it going to Snowflake? Is it going to SQL Server, Synapse, Databricks, Redshift? We don't know yet. One of the last steps is where we identify what the target is, and at that point it'll know how to create the load procedures, how to create the DDL, how to create the scripts that update the processes. But here is my data vault design, and this next button, create load and stage tables. Again, it's all rules based. I can select version number for my new load and stage. I've got rules here out of the box that tell 3D what it needs to do to create the load and stage tables. I let this run. It only takes a few seconds. And it is done. So here is our raw vault with the load and stage tables. There's the stage tables, there's the load tables, and here is my raw vault. Now, a couple things here. I can certainly right click here and say table source, and it gives me trackback diagrams. So we're starting with our Northwind database. In the customer's database, we're going to a load table, we're going to a stage table, and we're going to our hub. That's a pretty straightforward diagram. They can get more complicated. You'll see that when we look, say, at pits and bridges and maybe some views and things like that they can get quite complicated. But that's what we've done so far. We've profiled the source system. We've created our conceptual model of our raw vault with the hub satellites and links. Now we've added the loads and stage tables, and now we're getting ready to build it. So there's two final steps. We have to prepare this for RED, which is our builder tool, which will create the physical database. It'll create the DDL and execute it to create all the tables. It'll generate the Python scripts and action scripts needed to update data and move it through from the load tables to the stage tables to the raw vault. So I click on prepare for RED. I'll give it the same name I've been using before. And here's where we actually tell it what is our target. Now it actually matters because it's going to change data types, it's going to change the scripts and things it creates. My instance happens to be on Snowflake, but as I've said up until now, I could have been working in any target, it doesn't really matter. I've got several schemas here I've already defined in my data warehouse load stage and EDW. I could have rules that say where these things are going to move to, but I haven't set those rules up yet. But that's another example of how I can use automation. The rule of thumb is that if I'm doing anything manually more than 2 or 3 times, I should be able to create a rule that can do that. And I can certainly create a rule that would automatically put all my load tables into a load schema, stage tables into a stage schema, and everything else into EDW. I need to create a group, which is essentially the name of a project. I need to identify what objects are in here. So I may have a very, very large schema that maybe there's only a couple of objects I've changed, maybe there's only a couple of objects I want to deploy to my physical data warehouse. But in this case, this is all new, so I'll select all. And it needs to know what sources we're using. In this case, we're going to have a single source SQL Server. And more rules to follow. It's essentially creating a large XML file that we're going to use to move into our builder tool, and that's where all the fun happens. All right, we've prepared it for red. We've told it what the target is, and you notice now some of these columns have changed to actual real Snowflake data types instead of these sort of pseudo data types we had before. But now I'm going to export this to red. Again, red is our builder tool. It's what's actually going to create the DDL. The DML is used to create the data warehouse. I have to tell it where the metadata repository is, give it some login credentials, make sure they're valid. It's looking at the existing metadata repository, and it's telling me that all of these objects it's going to create, the load tables, the stage tables, the hubs, the satellites, and the links, they're all new tables. Now, if these tables did exist already, it would do one of 2 things. It could alter them to make the existing table match the new model, the new design, or we can choose to drop and recreate it. In some cases, for example, the load and stage tables, which are these I would call transient work tables, flush and fill kind of tables, we would certainly just drop them and recreate them. But if we have hubs, satellites, and links out there that have historic data, views, dimensions, things like that, we certainly don't want to drop those. We don't want to lose that data. Red and Wordscape has the capability of altering them rather than dropping them and recreating them. I'm going to click on the Generate Load Scripts and Update Routines for Objects. What that's going to do is that's going to generate the Python scripts that allow me to update everything. Other than that, I will just click on Next, and everything looks good. I need to move these to some of the schemas, the correct schemas. And it's telling me here's what it's going to do. It's going to replace the existing connection to Northwind database with the one I have here. Everything else is new and is going to be added. Again, if these tables existed already, I would have the option of dropping them and recreating them or altering them. So I'll hit deploy. And what it's doing now is it's going through and creating all of these tables. So Red, our builder tool, is writing DDL for Snowflake that is going to create all of these tables. And then when that's done, what it's going to do down here is you'll see that it's generating a lot of scripts. This takes a minute or two, literally about 120 seconds or so. So I'll go ahead and end this, and then I'll show you what we see in our builder tool. So here I am within Red, our builder tool, and what this has done is it's gone and imported my project. You can see all the load tables are here, all the hubs, the links, the satellites, the stage tables, everything's created. Now what I can do is say I want to populate the data. I can click on my project. I can build a job. Let me just change the degree of parallelization. I've got fields for, how do I want to run this? What do I want to do if it succeeds or fails? I can send out emails and things like that. But here are all the jobs, tasks within this job. And Wordscape understands that the load tables need to be loaded first, so they're all run in parallel. Then the stage tables are run in parallel. And then one of the features of Data Vault is you can load the hubs, the links, and the satellites all in parallel as well, because they don't use keys, they use generated hash keys. So you don't have the dependencies of parent-child relationships. Once I've got this job done, as I said, I can run it, and that will populate all my data. I can also go in and run these manually and load data that way. So if I have done that and I can look at my data, I can see, hey, here's my hub. I've got hash keys, I've got my business key, and other metadata associated with it. I can generate documentation with this, which is nice. Generates as an HTML file, which I can put on a file server somewhere, so anyone with a browser can get to it. They can see the objects in the warehouse, they can see comments, they can see comments on the columns. Maybe there's a metric that the comment says this is in gallons or liters or milliliters, whatever it is. There's a lot of documentation I can add as well. So that's the end of our quick demo. This is, as I said, the proverbial tip of the iceberg. If you would like to see a full-blown demo and maybe see how Warescape can work in your environment, feel free to give us a look at warescape.com and contact us there. Thank you very much.